Sue Valentine worked as a print and radio journalist in South Africa, working for the Star newspaper, as well as being executive producer on a daily current affairs radio show on South African Broadcasting Corporation. Sue was media director at IDASA, a pro-democracy advocacy organization working with the Free Airwaves movement to re-regulate broadcasting in South Africa and develop community radio. She also served on the media advisory board of the Open Society Foundation for South Africa, and in 2005 worked as the director of the foundation's media program in South Africa. Sue established Health E-News Service, a non-profit news agency based in Cape Town that specializes in public health issues, especially HIV, AIDS, and supplied news coverage to local media. She joins us live in our studios as Africa Program Coordinator with the Committee to Protect Journalists. Sue Valentine, welcome to Sahara TV.
Thanks, Fungai.
Okay, so now CPJ, Committee for the Protection of Journalists, actually recently produced or released a statement asking the Nigerian government to quicken up the issuance of visas, and this was before the postponement of these elections were made from February 14th to March the 28th. Was there any reason why CPJ felt that they needed to issue this press release?
Absolutely. There was a very good reason. We'd been contacted by some journalists, in particular one foreign correspondent, who said he'd heard that up to 40 journalists had applied for visas and were still in limbo, had no information.
Okay, go ahead.
And
I was going to try to figure out the time frame.
So this was a week ago, beginning of February. We were notified that up to 40 journalists had been denied visas. We then made some inquiries of our own, discovered that another big news organization had applied 8 different times to different embassies and had been denied. They didn't want their name public because they were still trying and didn't want to get in the bad books of the Nigerians. And so we know that, at least 40 to 50 journalists were unable to enter the country. And following those inquiries, we made contact with the Ministry of Information. CPJ has a representative in Nigeria. He, together with some of the journalist unions, went, and we were told this was not a plot. That journalists needed to, there were no special categories for journalists, they needed to go through the motions. But whether it's a plot or not, the effect is the same, that journalists were being kept away from being able to cover the most important elections in Africa, given that Nigeria is the largest economy and the largest country and the largest democracy.
And one of the most tightest presidential elections ever for the country. But now, is there any kind of specific time limit in terms of when somebody can apply and then also get a response?
There was a deadline which is now passed that, in fact, of Wednesday of this week, journalists needed to collect their credentials from the Independent Electoral Commission in Nigeria. So that deadline is now passed. New deadlines need to be put in place, and we haven't been notified of those yet. Through our meetings that we had on the ground in Abuja at the Ministry of Information, we were told that they're aware of the problem, they're addressing it, and journalists were beginning to get visas. That being said, certainly all 40 that we know of who are struggling have not yet been issued with visas, but hopefully the bottleneck has been opened up.
Now, we're talking of 40, agencies, but we've seen the BBC, we've seen the CNN, and we've seen Al Jazeera report already from Nigeria. Which ones are these? Are these African journalists?
No, not only. And I don't really, well, one example, this reporter does have her visa now, but she was a reporter with the Washington Post who was struggling and I believe has just got a visa. The other big agency, I don't want to mention their name yet, I haven't checked with them, but they are still in the process of applying for visas for their various correspondents. And that was a big agency that was struggling to get accreditation.
Okay, was there any explanation from the Nigerian government after your inquiries to explain to why the delays were being experienced?
No, I think it seemed like different rules were perhaps being applied in different embassies. So it seemed to be a more of a bureaucratic incompetence and snarl-ups. And whether one can read into the fact that perhaps the embassy in South Africa was being a little bit slower than other embassies because of the diplomatic jostling that sometimes exists between South Africa and Nigeria. But certainly in South Africa, people applying through that channel were struggling.
So where did you get most of these delays? Was there any specific location?
Where people had been denied were South Africa, Nairobi in Kenya, and the Paris embassy in France. Those were some of the more difficult ones.
So you say denied, not delayed?
Well, no, delayed, because they had no success to date. They hadn't been told, we're not giving you a visa. They just hadn't got the visas.
Okay, so once these visas are granted, they catch a plane, they land, they have to then approach, is it the Electoral Commission to then get credentials?
Yes, they do need to go in, and that's that's particularly for covering the elections and to have access to, get to the polling stations.
Has the Nigerian side been very responsible in trying to give these people credentials on the ground in Nigeria, those that have been cleared?
As far as we know, that's been going pretty smoothly. The only, again, the kind of logistical hurdle for people is that they have to, once arriving in Nigeria, need to make it to Abuja, where the Electoral Commission is, and collect their documentation in person, which is cumbersome. It's not the ideal system.
So then, hopefully there's no of that red tape and all these.
We hope. I mean, CPJ, we're concerned about the larger picture in terms of what this means for press freedom, for transparency around the elections, and the kind of all the ins and outs of journalists having to jump through those hoops. We haven't kind of pulled the whole thing apart, but the system is there. Journalists can be accredited. It's just been extremely slow, definitely a bottleneck with worrying consequences, but we hope it's been addressed.
Okay, so just in case now that these elections have been delayed, and they've been delayed because of security concerns, we are not too clear exactly what security concerns might imply at this moment, but we obviously know that Nigeria is a country where there've been random explosions of bombs and Boko Haram, the insurgency and everything. But for instance, if there is political violence, like, politically, orchestrated violence, and journalists sometimes come into contact with these and become victims, is there a number for their protection that they can call in terms of reaching out for help? Because once they go out in the fields, not a lot of people know exactly what's going on there.
Sure. Certainly. Look, there's the Nigerian Union of Journalists, which is very active, and we have been working with them in the meetings with the Ministry of Information around the visa issue. And together with them, we are monitoring journalist safety. We're concerned about possible, as the political temperature rises and the tensions manifest between parties, that journalists continue to have the right to report what different parties are saying and shouldn't be seen as being caught up in the politicking of the day. So we are monitoring that. CPJ remains absolutely on alert and vigilant. People can contact our website. Our email addresses are all there. We have a representative in Nigeria, Peter Nkanga. His details are on the website, and obviously, anyone in the Africa program, we would welcome any reports of any violations that threaten journalists in any way, and we will, either make a lot of noise about it, follow the right channels. Our interest is in journalist safety and so that journalists can do their jobs and report the news that we all depend upon. Okay, so now in closing, I'd just like to ask, has there been any record, where journalists were quite abused, and obviously you got involved in any African country
besides, you know, has there been any in the past?
I mean, journalists certainly are arrested in many instances, and when we've heard about it, CPJ has followed up. And, you know, whether we don't want to blow our own trumpet too loudly, but certainly as a result of making some phone calls, making sure that countries feel watched. We all behave a bit better when we know somebody's checking on how we're behaving. And that's part of the principle that we use, that we hear of problems, we will follow up, make inquiries. And certainly journalists have been released as a result of some of our inquiries. You know, there are other cases, unfortunately, countries like Ethiopia, where despite our efforts and those of many other organizations, 17 journalists are in jail. So, you know, we encourage anybody to try and raise concerns. Ethiopian elections are in May, so that's a concern. But certainly from our efforts, from our collaboration with other groups, our interactions with government and justice ministries, there are results. That's why we keep trying to do what we do.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us on Sahara TV and to give us an update on exactly what's happening with journalists going over to Nigeria to monitor these elections.
You're most welcome. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. So that was Sue Valentine, Africa Program Coordinator for Committee to Protect Journalists. So for those journalists who encounter any problems in Nigeria during the election period, the people to contact would be Peter Nkanga on email pnkanga@cpj.org. I repeat, pnkanga@cpj.org. Or you can also contact the Africa Program Coordinator, who's Sue Valentine, at svalentine@cpj.org. I repeat, you can also contact Sue Valentine at svalentine@cpj.org. I'm Fungai Maboreke.